Most people don't fail financially because they lack money, they fail because they never learned to respect it when the amounts were small enough to practice with. If you cannot treat $10 like it matters, you will never be trusted by life with 10,000, and you will almost certainly destroy $1 million if it ever lands in your hands. If you value clarity over hype and wisdom over quick fixes, consider subscribing to this channel. We don't sell dreams here, we examine the principles that actually work when emotions run high and markets turn cold. The idea seems almost insulting at first, doesn't it? $10. In a world where people dream of six-figure incomes and early retirement, who has time to worry about $10? But that dismissive attitude is precisely the problem. It reveals a deeper misunderstanding about how wealth is actually built, and more importantly, how it is preserved. Wealth does not begin the moment your paycheck gets bigger or when you finally land that promotion you have been chasing for years. Wealth begins the moment you stop being careless with the small amounts you already control. This is what Charlie Munger understood with piercing clarity throughout his long life as an investor and thinker. He knew that the person who cannot govern themselves with modest sums will not suddenly gain discipline when the stakes increase. The habits you build with $10 are the same habits that will either protect or destroy you when you are managing 10,000 or 100,000 or more. Every single dollar you hold in your hand carries within it a quiet decision. You can use it to multiply your future options, or you can let it vanish into consumption that brings no lasting value. The $10 rule is not about being cheap or denying yourself comfort. It is about developing a relationship with money that is grounded in respect rather than emotion. People who learn to treat even small amounts as capital rather than just spending money are the ones who eventually reach a point where financial anxiety no longer controls their lives. They stop thinking about money constantly because they have built systems and habits that work automatically in their favor. Most people believe that financial transformation begins with some major external event, a big raise, an inheritance, a lucky investment, or a sudden breakthrough. The uncomfortable truth is that transformation begins in the smallest decisions that no one else is paying attention to. $10 may look insignificant when you hold it, but it functions as a mirror reflecting back to you how you think, how you behave under temptation, and how you handle the weight of responsibility that comes with managing resources. The $10 rule is really a test of character disguised as something simple. If you can manage $10 wisely, making thoughtful decisions about whether to spend it or deploy it towards something that grows, you are already building the foundation for everything greater that will follow. The first principle here is not about hoarding money or living in deprivation. It is about respecting money enough to treat it as a tool rather than a toy. People lose fortunes later in life because they never learn to value small amounts early on. They assume that discipline is something you suddenly develop when the stakes get high, when you are managing a retirement account or deciding whether to buy real estate or invest in the market. But discipline does not work that way. Discipline is a muscle you build long before the high-stakes moments ever arrive. Every time you make a conscious choice with $10, you are setting an internal standard for your financial future. You are training your mind to pause, to evaluate, to think about consequences instead of just reacting to impulses. There is an old saying that small leaks sink great ships. It is not the dramatic storms or catastrophic events that destroy most financial lives. It is the tiny leaks that people ignore every single day because they seem too small to matter. A coffee purchased out of habit rather than desire. A subscription you forgot you signed up for. A purchase made out of boredom on a Sunday afternoon when you are scrolling through your phone. None of these transactions feel significant when they happen in isolation. But they compound quietly in the wrong direction, draining away resources that could have been put to work building your future. What the $10 rule demands from you is awareness. Awareness that every small outflow of money is either an investment in your future or a leak that weakens your position. The decision itself may be small, but the habit it reinforces is enormous. The person who learns to pause before spending a small sum, who asks themselves whether this purchase adds real value or just fills a momentary void, is developing the kind of mental attention that later prevents catastrophic mistakes. When you train your mind to question every minor transaction, you are not being stingy or joyless. You are practicing rationality. And rationality, as Munger understood deeply, is not about refusing pleasure or living like a miser. Rationality means understanding value. A rational person knows when a dollar spent brings genuine comfort, connection, or long-term benefit, and when it only buys a fleeting sensation followed by regret. The reason most people stay trapped financially, cycling through the same problems decade after decade, is because they mentally separate their small daily decisions from their big long-term goals. They think to themselves, what possible difference does $10 make in the grand scheme of my financial life? But the irony, the painful irony that most people never grasp, is that the grand scheme is built entirely out of those $10 moments. A person who says they will start saving or investing once they earn more money is like someone saying they will start exercising once they get healthy. The sequence is completely backward. You do not wait for abundance to arrive before you start acting wisely. Acting wisely is precisely what creates abundance. That is the true essence of the $10 rule. It is not about self-denial or living in fear of spending. It is about building a relationship with money that is grounded in respect rather than driven by emotion or ego. When you start treating even small amounts with purpose and intention, something shifts in your brain. You begin to develop what psychologists call a long-term orientation, a mindset that prioritizes growth and security over immediate gratification. That shift in thinking, that quiet internal change, is where financial maturity actually begins. What financial mistake taught you your most painful lesson? Share it below. Sometimes our worst decisions become our greatest teachers. Every time you handle $10, you are also handling opportunity. The question is whether you let it slip thoughtlessly through your fingers, or whether you use it intentionally to build something greater than the momentary pleasure of spending it. This rule forces you to see money not as something that exists merely to be spent, but as a worker that can go out and earn for you if you deploy it correctly. Imagine each dollar as an employee in your personal economy. Would you rather let that employee sit idle, producing nothing, or would you send it out to work, generating returns that multiply over time? People who understand the concept of compounding, who have internalized it not just intellectually but emotionally, know that the smallest investments made today can grow into meaningful wealth tomorrow. The difference between a spender and an investor is not the amount of money they have access to. It is the mindset they bring to every financial decision. The spender sees money as fuel for consumption, something to be burned in exchange for immediate experience. The investor sees money as seeds for future growth, something to be planted with care and patience. $10 properly used, directed towards something that appreciates or generates returns rather than something that depreciates or disappears, teaches you how to plant those seeds and then exercise the discipline to wait for them to grow. Patience may not feel rewarding in the short term. It does not provide the dopamine hit that spending does. But patience is the only financial strategy that never stops working in the long run. It is the strategy that allowed Munger and his partner Warren Buffett to compound wealth over decades while others chased hot stocks and lost fortunes trying to get rich quickly. Another critical dimension of this rule is how it gradually shapes your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who is merely trying to save money or someone who is struggling to be more disciplined. You start seeing yourself as someone who is actively building capital. This shift in identity is extraordinarily powerful. When you identify as a person who respects every dollar, who treats even small amounts as meaningful, you naturally start making decisions that align with wealth creation. You avoid the trap of thinking that more money will automatically solve your problems, because you have already learned through practice that clarity and discipline are the true sources of financial strength. The way you treat $10 reflects your ability to control desire, to delay gratification, and to think rationally even when emotions are pulling you in another direction. These are precisely the same traits that guide billion-dollar investment decisions. The mind that spends carelessly with small amounts will do exactly the same with large amounts. The mind that questions, evaluates, and plans carefully with small sums will protect large sums when they eventually arrive. That is why respecting small money is genuinely the seed of financial greatness. When you begin to act according to this principle consistently, something subtle but profound happens in your psychology. You stop being emotional about money. You start to detach from the urge to impress other people or to fill empty moments with purchases that bring no lasting satisfaction. You stop chasing the dopamine rush that comes from spending and start chasing actual results that improve your life over time. This calmer, more measured relationship with money allows you to make better choices because you are no longer simply reacting to impulses or external pressures. You are thinking. You are reasoning. You become the type of person who uses logic rather than mood to make financial decisions. That is what separates those who build lasting wealth from those who repeatedly lose it. The $10 rule is really a mental filter against irrationality. It keeps your emotions in check and your long-term goals in clear focus. By practicing awareness and intentionality with small sums, you develop a mind that automatically resists short-term temptation even when no one is watching. That is how small money begins to teach you lessons that apply at every level of wealth. Now let us move to the second major principle, which is about independence of thought. One of the greatest and most common mistakes people make with their money is outsourcing their financial decisions to others. They rely on friends who claim to know about investing. They follow influencers on social media who promise secret strategies. They chase trends without understanding the underlying logic. The problem with this approach is that when you let others do your thinking for you, you also let them dictate the trajectory of your future. The $10 rule is as much a mental exercise as it is a financial discipline. It is a daily reminder to think for yourself, to make independent evaluations of value, and to trust your own reasoning process. When you practice making thoughtful decisions with small amounts, you sharpen your judgment. You begin to see patterns that others miss. You start to notice the difference between a genuine opportunity and an illusion cleverly disguised as one. Thinking for yourself is one of the rarest and most valuable skills in a world that thrives on noise, imitation, and herd behavior. People are constantly distracted by advice, trends, predictions, and opinions, but very few stop to carefully analyze the reasoning behind those opinions. If you train your mind by making small, deliberate financial decisions, you strengthen your ability to resist the herd. You develop immunity to the panic and euphoria that drive most people to make terrible choices at exactly the wrong moments. Independent thinking in money management does not mean arrogantly ignoring everyone else or refusing to learn from others. It means you weigh evidence for yourself. You question assumptions. You understand why you are doing what you are doing rather than just following instructions. This skill becomes your greatest protection against manipulation. Every financial scam, every bad investment, every economic disaster relies fundamentally on someone's inability to think independently. The habit of reflection and analysis, built through the daily discipline of managing even small sums thoughtfully, creates a mental filter that recognizes nonsense before it costs you dearly. When you think through your own logic with small decisions, asking yourself why this purchase makes sense or why this saving strategy is better than another, you gain confidence in your reasoning process. That confidence becomes unshakable when larger stakes come into play. Most people underestimate how much financial strength actually comes from mental strength. To handle money well over decades, you must first handle your thoughts well. When you learn to analyze clearly, to question assumptions, to think in terms of cause and effect rather than just reacting to emotions, you stop being a follower. You stop being the kind of person who jumps anxiously from one financial fad to another, always searching for the magic formula. You develop patience, curiosity, and healthy skepticism, three qualities that protect wealth far better than any market prediction or hot tip ever could. The $10 rule cultivates these qualities in the smallest moments, in situations where the stakes are low enough that you can practice without catastrophic consequences. It is in those small moments that you either train your mind to think clearly or you lose control of it to impulse and emotion. Over time, this habit of thinking independently rewires how you approach every financial choice you face. You stop asking the crowd, "What should I do?" and you start asking yourself, "What makes sense given what I know and what I can reasonably predict?" That shift in the question you ask is the foundation of financial wisdom. The goal is not to be right all the time, because no one can predict the future with perfect accuracy. The goal is to be reasonable all the time. Reason protects you from ruin. When you make decisions based on your own careful analysis, you own both the mistake and the lesson. Each decision becomes a teacher. Each $10 choice becomes a small case study in judgment. The compounding of these judgments over months and years creates what people call financial intuition. But this intuition is not luck or magic or some mysterious gift. It is simply the natural byproduct of consistent rational thought applied over time. This principle teaches you that independence is a form of freedom. Financial freedom is not just about having money in the bank. It is about not needing to rely on others to think for you, to tell you what to do, or to validate your choices. The more you strengthen your independent reasoning, the less vulnerable you become to manipulation, hype, and fear. In a noisy world filled with conflicting advice and emotional appeals, clarity is a genuine competitive advantage. The person who can think calmly and carefully about small sums will think clearly about large investments. The same logical process applies at every level of wealth. When you train your mind through the discipline of handling $10 with independent thought, you are not just learning how to manage money. You are learning how to manage yourself. And that, more than anything else, is what leads to lasting financial transformation. Patience is one of the rarest and most valuable skills in the financial world because everyone wants to get rich quickly, but very few are willing to stay disciplined long enough to let compounding do its quiet, invisible work. The third principle begins with the understanding that delayed gratification is not merely a virtue your grandmother preached. It is a genuine financial weapon. When you choose to wait, when you choose to plan instead of react, you are already separating yourself from the majority of people. Most people lose money not because they lack opportunities or intelligence, but because they lack patience. They destroy their own potential growth by constantly seeking excitement and stimulation over sustainable results. The $10 rule is not fundamentally about how much money you earn. It is about how long you can delay the urge to spend what you have. Every small decision to hold back an unnecessary purchase, to resist the impulse to buy something you do not truly need, is a silent investment in your future power and freedom. It teaches you to think in terms of cause and effect, in terms of consequences that play out over years, instead of thinking only about momentary pleasure. You can see this truth demonstrated everywhere if you pay attention. People who constantly chase the newest gadget, the latest fashion trend, or every hyped investment opportunity always feel subjectively like they are moving forward. But in reality, they are only moving in circles, repeatedly making the same mistakes with different objects. Every impulsive choice buys a brief moment of satisfaction but sells years of financial peace and security. Financial freedom does not come from accumulation alone, from simply piling up money. It comes from self-control. If you cannot delay gratification for $10, if you cannot resist a small temptation, you will not be able to do it for $10,000. The mind that constantly needs instant reward is the same mind that panics when the stock market drops 20%, that sells everything at the bottom out of fear, and that repeats costly mistakes year after year. But when you train yourself to wait, to think before acting, to carefully evaluate before deciding, you start to build something far more valuable than money itself. You build emotional discipline. There is an old truth that wealth flows quietly to those who can handle boredom. Waiting is boring. Watching your savings grow slowly, seeing your investments compound at 7 or 8% per year instead of doubling overnight, is boring. Reading annual reports and studying business fundamentals when others are chasing cryptocurrency trends and meme stocks is boring. But boredom is actually the birthplace of sustainable wealth because it means you are staying consistent while others are constantly distracted. The ability to delay gratification is really the ability to stay focused and committed when nothing exciting is happening. It means trusting the process more than trusting your emotions. Most people lose this psychological battle because they confuse activity with progress. They think that doing something, anything, is better than doing nothing, even when that something actively destroys value. But the truly wise understand that patience is not passive inactivity. It is controlled, strategic action. It is the art of doing less but doing it better. When you practice the $10 rule consistently, you are teaching yourself this art every single day. You are choosing to act with clear intention rather than blind impulse. Every time you resist the urge to waste small amounts of money on things that do not matter, you are strengthening the psychological muscle of restraint. Over time, that muscle becomes your greatest defense against the financial chaos that the modern world constantly throws at you. The world is deliberately designed to test your patience at every turn. Advertisements follow you across every screen. Social media shows you what everyone else is supposedly buying and enjoying. Consumer culture relentlessly encourages you to trade long-term gain for short-term thrill. The only way to survive and thrive in that environment is to develop an internal compass that consistently points you back toward reason and long-term thinking. Delayed gratification sharpens that compass. It gives you clarity in a world specifically built to confuse you and cloud your judgment. When you master the art of waiting intelligently, your entire relationship with money changes. You stop seeing money as something that exists to be spent immediately and you start seeing it as something to be deployed strategically. You begin to genuinely appreciate the space between earning money and spending it, because that space is where real strategy lives. In that space, you make choices based on logic rather than emotion. And that fundamental difference is what separates a disciplined investor from a reckless spender. Which of Munger's principles do you find hardest to apply consistently? Let's talk in the comments. We are all working on this together. Every great investor in history succeeded not because they possessed secret knowledge unavailable to others, but because they had uncommon patience and discipline. They knew how to wait calmly for the right opportunity instead of forcing action. They knew how to let their capital grow without constantly interfering or second-guessing. You cannot rush the process of compounding any more than you can rush the growth of an oak tree from an acorn. The only job you have is to keep watering it, to protect it, and to avoid cutting the roots prematurely because you got impatient. This principle teaches that patience creates leverage in your life. Every time you successfully delay gratification, every time you choose the future over the present, you give your future self more resources and more tools to work with. The money you do not waste becomes a seed that grows. The discipline you build becomes inner strength. The self-control you practice becomes confidence that carries over into every area of your life. Together, they form a habit of success that cannot be easily shaken by temporary bad luck or misfortune. The $10 rule is your daily training ground for building this mindset. It reminds you that the person who can wait intelligently, who can delay gratification without feeling deprived, can eventually afford to act decisively when the moment is right. Waiting is not weakness or passivity. It is preparation. It is gathering strength. The fourth principle continues this logic by focusing directly on readiness. Opportunity is completely meaningless if you are not prepared to recognize it when it appears or to use it effectively once you see it. Most people spend their lives fantasizing about getting lucky, about being in the right place at the right time. But luck without readiness is just noise passing by. The truth that Munger understood is that opportunities are actually everywhere, constantly surrounding us, but they only become visible to the prepared mind. Preparation does not happen magically in the moment you need it. It happens quietly, invisibly, long before the opportunity arrives. Every small act of financial discipline you practice, every hour you spend learning and studying, every habit of saving and investing, every thoughtful decision about where your money should go, all of these are rehearsals for bigger opportunities that will come later. If you cannot manage small amounts of money responsibly now, how can you possibly expect to manage large sums wisely when they arrive? Readiness is not built in grand dramatic moments. It is built in the daily routine of thinking clearly and acting rationally when no one is watching and nothing exciting is happening. The world rewards people who are prepared to move decisively when others are still hesitating and doubting. Most individuals miss their best chances in life not because luck somehow ignored them, but because they were not ready to recognize the opportunity or act on it. When the right investment appears before you, when the right business idea crosses your path, your ability to act depends entirely on the foundation you have already built through years of small disciplined choices. Preparation gives you confidence, and confidence allows you to act without panic or paralysis. The unprepared person sees risk and danger everywhere because they have no internal structure to handle uncertainty. But the prepared person sees patterns, probabilities, and genuine potential. They have already trained their mind to make sense of chaos and ambiguity. That training begins with small sums, with the $10 rule, because fundamentally it is not about the money at all. It is about training your thinking. Preparation also means learning constantly, staying curious, never assuming you know everything. Every dollar you earn or save teaches you something valuable about how money moves through the economy, how markets react to events, and how human beings behave under pressure. The more you pay careful attention, the sharper your instincts become over time. When you read widely, observe carefully, and question assumptions, you are quietly building mental capital. This mental capital multiplies faster than financial capital because it gives you the ability to make better decisions forever. The prepared mind does not just stumble upon opportunities randomly. It actively creates them by seeing possibilities others miss. Readiness is like building a reservoir slowly over years. You fill it drop by drop, day by day, with small disciplined actions that seem insignificant at the time. And then one day when the inevitable drought comes, when the economy turns or unexpected expenses hit, you have water when everyone else is desperately thirsty. That is how genuine financial security feels. It is quiet confidence built over years of patient preparation. But readiness is not just intellectual or financial. It is emotional too. Many people fail to seize opportunity not because they do not see it, but because they are too afraid to act, too attached to comfort, or too influenced by what other people might think. Preparation cures that fear. When you have practiced discipline with small amounts over and over, you trust your process enough to handle big decisions without falling apart. You do not panic when markets fall sharply because you have trained your mind to think in decades, not days. You do not chase every shiny opportunity because you have learned to evaluate them through logic rather than greed or fear. The prepared investor is calm and steady, not because they can predict the future, but because they know how to survive and adapt to whatever the future brings. Opportunity and preparation are twins. One without the other is useless. The $10 rule is your first real lesson in aligning the two. Every time you handle a small amount with seriousness and respect, you are practicing for the larger amounts that will inevitably come later in life. You are building habits of thought, systems of control, and a mindset of patience that will allow you to recognize genuine value when others see only noise and confusion. That is why readiness is not luck or chance. It is pure intention built through action. You cannot fake preparation. It reveals itself clearly in how you respond under pressure. When the market panics and crashes, the unprepared mind sells everything in fear. The prepared mind holds steady or even buys more. When life presents an unexpected chance, the unprepared mind hesitates and overthinks. The prepared mind moves with confidence. There is a deeper truth woven through all of this. Life never gives you what you want or wish for. It gives you what you are prepared to handle. The more thoroughly you prepare, the more capable you become of handling complexity, uncertainty, and pressure. The less you prepare, the more fragile you remain even if you temporarily have wealth. Preparation multiplies opportunity. It transforms uncertainty into potential. Every small financial decision you make today is either building that readiness or quietly eroding it. When you treat $10 like capital that deserves respect, you train your mind to treat every resource with purpose and intention. And when opportunity finally arrives at your door, you will not need luck or perfect timing. You will simply be ready. The beauty of the $10 rule is that it serves as a training ground for both patience and preparation simultaneously. Patience teaches you to wait without wasting time. Preparation teaches you to use time wisely while you wait. One without the other is incomplete and weak. Together, they create the mindset that transforms ordinary people into extraordinary investors. The person who learns to delay gratification today and who prepares diligently for tomorrow builds a quiet power that money alone cannot buy. That power is the ability to act decisively, calmly, and intelligently when everyone around you is being driven by emotion and fear. It is the ability to use opportunity instead of being used by it. Patience and preparation are the twin engines of lasting wealth, and both begin with something as simple and accessible as how you treat a single $10 bill. Every person dreams of getting rich, of achieving financial freedom, of never worrying about money again. But very few realize that wealth is not built through a single grand decision or one perfect investment. It is built through a long unbroken chain of small consistent choices made over years and decades. The fifth principle teaches that compounding is not only a mathematical concept related to interest rates. It is also a behavioral principle. Money compounds when you invest it wisely and leave it alone. But your decisions compound too. Every rational choice you make strengthens your ability to make the next one even better. And every foolish choice weakens your judgment over time. These repeated decisions, these daily choices about how to handle money and resources, shape the quality of your entire life far more than any single external event ever could. The same rule that applies to compound interest applies equally to habits. You do not become a disciplined person in one dramatic day. You build discipline by practicing small acts of discipline daily until they become automatic, until they become part of who you are. The $10 rule is a living example of this philosophy in action. It is a small manageable practice that creates an enormous ripple effect across your entire financial life. When you choose to think clearly about even the smallest amounts, when you pause to ask whether this purchase serves your future, you are compounding rationality itself. Each time you resist an impulsive purchase, you are making a deposit into your future character. Each time you evaluate carefully before you act, you are training yourself to think like an investor rather than a consumer. Those moments may seem minor and forgettable at the time, but they are deposits into the person you are becoming. The person you will be 5 years from now or 10 years from now is being built from the habits you practice with small money today. Just as financial compounding silently multiplies your returns over decades, behavioral compounding multiplies your wisdom and judgment. The return is not always visible immediately, which is why most people give up too soon. But it accumulates steadily in the background until one day it fundamentally changes how you think, how you earn, and how you live. Most people underestimate the power of this invisible process because they expect to see results too soon. They want proof of progress in weeks or months, not years. But compounding does not work that way. It hides its rewards until it decides you have earned them through consistency. You cannot see your habits paying off in the short term because the real transformation is happening inside your mind, in your automatic patterns of thinking. Every time you make a rational decision, you are carving a neural path in your brain that makes the next rational decision easier and more natural. Eventually, you stop fighting your impulses constantly and you start operating from wisdom automatically. That is when you know that compounding has taken deep root in your life. Discipline is no longer an exhausting effort. It is simply who you are. This principle is what fundamentally separates those who build lasting wealth from those who merely chase it desperately. The person who learns to handle small amounts with logic and care does not just get better at saving money. They get better at living intelligently. They begin to see the pattern that connects every part of life. Health, relationships, career, time management, and money, all follow the same basic rule. Whatever you practice consistently grows stronger over time. If you practice patience, you gain peace. If you practice impulsiveness, you gain chaos and regret. Compounding is happening everywhere around you and inside you, whether you notice it or not. The only question is whether it is working for you or against you. The $10 rule gives you conscious control over that direction. It is not about being frugal or cheap or joyless. It is about being intentional. Each $10 decision becomes a rehearsal for the kind of future you are actively building. If you spend it without thought, you are unconsciously reinforcing carelessness. If you direct it wisely, you are reinforcing intelligence. It is not really the money itself that matters most. It is the message you are sending to yourself. You are teaching your brain what kind of behavior it should repeat and amplify. Over time, that repetition becomes identity. You start genuinely identifying as a disciplined thinker, a patient builder, someone who respects the process. When that identity shift happens, you begin to act consistently with that new self-image. Every financial improvement starts in the mind before it ever appears in the bank account. The $10 rule just accelerates that evolution by giving you daily opportunities to practice it. Which principle from today's lesson will you apply starting now? Tell us in the comments. Commitment becomes stronger when you say it out loud. There is another important layer to behavioral compounding that works in reverse. Just as good decisions compound and multiply, so do mistakes. Every time you excuse a bad financial decision by telling yourself, "It is only $10, you are training your mind to justify carelessness. That is exactly how financial decline begins. Not with one catastrophic mistake, but quietly and slowly through accumulated small bad choices. The danger is never in one bad decision. The danger is in the habit of ignoring small leaks, of dismissing small amounts as irrelevant. Over time, those leaks turn into patterns that drain your potential. The same principle works powerfully in the opposite direction when you commit to awareness. Every small moment of clarity protects you from future regret. Each wise choice becomes a brick in the foundation of your financial freedom. That is how compounding transforms not just your wealth, but your entire mindset and character. This brings us naturally to the sixth and final principle, which is about control. Real wealth is not fundamentally about how much money you make or how much you accumulate. It is about how much control you have over your decisions, your time, and your emotions. People often think of money as freedom, and in a sense it is. But money without control is just chaos in a different form. You can earn millions and still be enslaved by your habits, your fears, and your impulses if you never learn to master yourself. Control is the hidden currency of the financially independent. The $10 rule is a practical tool for developing that control at the most fundamental level. If you can govern how you treat small money, if you can make disciplined decisions when the stakes are low, you can govern how you treat large amounts because the underlying psychology is exactly the same. The modern world constantly tempts you to surrender control. Every advertisement you see, every piece of media you consume, every social trend you encounter is carefully designed to make you act before you think. It convinces you that happiness is found in spending, that self-worth is measured by what you own and display, and that immediate gratification is your right. But the moment you start saying no to unnecessary spending, the moment you start making conscious choices, you begin reclaiming control over your life. It is not just about saving money or building wealth. It is about regaining ownership of your own decisions. The first real freedom you earn is not financial. It is mental. It is the ability to think independently, to choose your own priorities, and to stay calm and rational when everyone else is reacting emotionally. Control gives you leverage over your own life. The person who can live comfortably below their means can survive any economic storm. They can invest during market downturns when assets are cheap. They can stay patient during periods of uncertainty. They can act strategically when opportunities appear. The person who lacks control lives in constant reaction to external circumstances. They are slaves to every whim, every trend, every emotional trigger that crosses their path. Control transforms money from something you desperately chase into something you calmly manage. It shifts your entire mindset from survival mode to strategic mode. When you have genuine control, you stop living on the edge of financial anxiety and you start living with clear purpose. This is why mastering small amounts matters so profoundly. Control is a psychological muscle that strengthens with repetition. You do not suddenly become disciplined with large sums of money out of nowhere. You train yourself in the small moments when nobody is watching, when the stakes seem too low to matter. Each time you decide to save instead of spend, to think instead of react, to wait instead of rush, you are proving to yourself that you are in charge of your own behavior. That proof builds confidence, and confidence builds calm. Eventually, you no longer feel like money is controlling your life and your choices. You feel like you are steering it with intention. This calm confidence is what gives you long-term financial power. It protects you from the three emotions that destroy most fortunes: panic, greed, and fear. Control also brings valuable perspective. When you stop reacting to every impulse and every external pressure, you start to see the bigger picture of your life. You realize that true wealth is not measured by how much you own, but by how much peace and freedom you have. The person who earns less but lives entirely on their own terms, who owes nothing and fears nothing, is often genuinely wealthier than the person who earns more but spends every dollar trying to impress others or keep up with some imaginary standard. Financial control creates emotional stability, and emotional stability creates better decisions. It becomes a self-reinforcing cycle of improvement. The more control you exercise, the stronger your decision-making becomes. And the stronger your decision-making becomes, the more control you gain over your circumstances. There is a deep quiet satisfaction that comes from control because it represents mastery over yourself. It is knowing that you can delay gratification without feeling deprived. That you can hold cash without the burning urge to spend it. That you can think long-term while others are distracted by short-term noise. That is the mindset of the financially strong. They do not see restraint as painful sacrifice. They see it as intelligent strategy. They understand that every dollar not wasted is a soldier ready to fight for their future freedom. Control gives clear direction to those soldiers. It organizes your resources and focuses them on what actually matters. Control also fundamentally changes your relationship with opportunity. When you have control over yourself, you can consciously choose which risks to take and which to avoid. You no longer act out of desperation or fear. You can pass on investments that seem too good to be true because you understand that true success is always the result of steady calculated effort over time. The lack of control forces people into poor decisions, making them chase returns that are unrealistic. But when you are in control, you have the luxury of patience. You can wait calmly for the right opportunities and strike decisively when the odds are genuinely in your favor. Control gives you time, and time is the single most valuable asset anyone can possess. The most powerful lesson about control is that it is not something you magically find after you have accumulated money. It is something you must build before wealth arrives. The people who seem effortlessly wealthy, who handle money with calm confidence, did not gain control after becoming rich. They became rich precisely because they learned control early in life. They mastered the same small disciplines that others overlooked and dismissed as insignificant. They applied the same fundamental principles with $10 that later guided them when they were managing millions. The habit of control scales naturally with wealth, but the lack of control scales too, often with devastating consequences. Money amplifies who you already are at the core. If you are careless and impulsive with little, you will be reckless and destructive with much. But if you are disciplined and thoughtful with little, you will be powerful and wise with much. The $10 rule is your daily practice ground for developing this power. It is a constant reminder that financial life is not fundamentally about external circumstances, lucky breaks, or perfect timing. It is about internal habits, about the patterns of thinking and behaving that you reinforce every single day. Compounding behavior builds momentum in your life. Control maintains direction and keeps you on course. One without the other eventually collapses. Together, they create a quiet but unstoppable forward progress. You do not notice the transformation immediately because it happens gradually, almost invisibly. But one day, perhaps years from now, you wake up and realize you no longer think like everyone else around you. You no longer fear small financial losses. You no longer chase short-term thrills or measure success by what you own or what others think. You have built the two most valuable assets any human being can possess, the ability to think clearly under pressure and the ability to act with disciplined control. Those two forces, working together consistently over time, quietly and relentlessly change your financial reality. They change it permanently. This is not motivational talk or empty inspiration. This is the observable pattern that Charlie Munger studied and lived by for decades. He understood that most people fail not because the world is unfair or because opportunities do not exist. They fail because they never develop the mental tools necessary to handle money wisely. They never practice with small amounts. They never build the habits that protect wealth. They wait for some future moment when discipline will magically appear, but that moment never comes because discipline only comes from practice. The $10 rule is that practice. It is simple enough that anyone can start today, regardless of their current financial situation. But it is profound enough that it can change the entire trajectory of your life if you take it seriously. When you respect $10, when you pause before spending it and ask yourself whether this choice serves your future or just satisfies a momentary impulse, you are doing something most people never do. You are thinking. You are exercising control. You are building the foundation that wealth requires. Wealth is not a destination you arrive at suddenly. It is a direction you move in consistently. Every small choice either moves you toward financial freedom or away from it. There is no neutral ground. Every dollar you handle is either working for you or against you. The $10 rule forces you to confront that reality in the smallest, most manageable way possible. It removes every excuse. You cannot say you do not have enough money to start building good habits. $10 is enough. You cannot say the stakes are too high to practice. $10 is low enough that mistakes will not destroy you, but meaningful enough that good decisions will teach you valuable lessons. This is the wisdom that Charlie Munger embodied throughout his life. He did not chase complexity. He did not look for shortcuts or secret formulas. He focused on fundamental principles that worked across time and circumstance. Respect for money. Independent thinking. Patience. Preparation. Compounding behavior. Self-control. These are not exciting principles. They do not promise overnight success or dramatic transformations. But they work. They worked for Munger over decades. They worked for every person who has built sustainable wealth without relying on luck or inheritance. And they will work for you if you practice them consistently with the same seriousness that you would bring to any other skill worth mastering. The challenge, of course, is that these principles require something most people are unwilling to give. They require time. They require consistency. They require the ability to do boring things repeatedly without immediate reward. They require you to think differently than the culture around you thinks. They require you to delay gratification while others indulge. They require you to stay calm and rational while others panic or get swept up in greed. These are not easy requirements, but they are simple ones. And the beautiful truth is that simplicity, applied consistently over time, produces extraordinary results. Complexity usually produces confusion and mistakes. Simplicity produces clarity and compound growth. As you move forward from here, the question you must ask yourself is not whether you understand these principles. The question is whether you will actually apply them. Understanding changes nothing. Only application changes your reality. You can listen to 1,000 hours of financial advice, read 100 books about investing, and follow every expert on social media, but none of that matters if you do not change your daily behavior. The gap between knowing and doing is where most people spend their entire lives. They know what they should do, but they do not do it. They wait for perfect conditions. They wait for more money. They wait for more time. They wait for more certainty. But perfect conditions never arrive, and while they wait, years pass and opportunities vanish. The $10 rule asks almost nothing from you. It does not require you to quit your job or move to a cheaper city or dramatically change your lifestyle. It simply asks you to think before you spend small amounts. It asks you to respect money enough to treat it with intention. It asks you to practice the habits that will protect you when larger amounts arrive. That is all. But that small shift, practiced consistently, creates a foundation that can support any level of wealth you eventually build. It protects you from the mistakes that destroy most fortunes. It trains your mind to think rationally instead of emotionally. It gives you control over the one thing you can always control, which is yourself. Charlie Munger spent decades watching people make the same financial mistakes over and over. He saw intelligent people destroy their wealth through impatience. He saw educated people lose fortunes by following crowds. He saw hard-working people remain trapped financially because they never learned to think clearly about money. And through all of that observation, he distilled his wisdom down to simple principles that anyone could understand and apply. The $10 rule captures the essence of that wisdom. It is not about the money. It is about the thinking. It is about building a mind that can handle responsibility, resist temptation, delay gratification, and make rational decisions under pressure. Those mental skills are worth infinitely more than any specific investment strategy or market prediction. If you can walk away from this lesson with one commitment, let it be this: start treating every small amount of money with the same respect you would give to a large amount. Do not dismiss $10 as meaningless. Do not excuse wasteful spending by saying it does not matter. It does matter. Not because $10 will make you rich, but because the habit of respecting $10 builds the character that creates and protects wealth. Every time you make a conscious choice with small money, you are becoming the person who can handle large money. Every time you pause to think instead of react, you are training yourself to think clearly when stakes are high. Every time you delay gratification, you are proving to yourself that you have control. These small acts accumulate invisibly into massive results over time. That is the magic of compounding, both financial and behavioral. You cannot see it working day by day, but over years and decades, it transforms everything. This is not theory. This is not speculation. This is observed reality from the lives of people like Charlie Munger, who practiced these principles for 50, 60, 70 years and built not just wealth, but wisdom. They built lives of meaning, independence, and quiet confidence. They built the freedom to make choices based on what made sense rather than what they could afford. They built peace of mind that comes from knowing they could handle whatever challenges appeared. That same peace, that same freedom, that same wisdom is available to you. Not immediately. Not magically. But inevitably, if you commit to the process. If you respect small money today, you will handle large money wisely tomorrow. If you think independently today, you will avoid costly mistakes tomorrow. If you practice patience today, you will benefit from compounding tomorrow. If you prepare today, you will be ready for opportunity tomorrow. If you build control today, you will have freedom tomorrow. Everything compounds. The question is what you choose to compound: wisdom or foolishness, discipline or chaos, clarity or confusion. The choice is yours, and it starts with something as simple as $10. Not tomorrow. Not when you have more money or more time or more certainty. Today. Right now. With the next small financial decision you face. That is where transformation begins. That is where your financial future is actually built. In the small moments. In the quiet choices. In the daily practice of thinking clearly and acting wisely. If you found value in this perspective, if these principles resonate with something you already knew but needed to hear again, consider subscribing. This channel exists to explore the kind of wisdom that actually works over time, the principles that create lasting results rather than temporary excitement. We are building a community of people who value clarity over hype, patience over impulse, and wisdom over cleverness. Join us on that journey. Your financial future will thank you for it.